your life. And this plate represents maybe later on in life work, or it could be for you guys, school. So when you put just a little bit into your relationship, God's blessings really don't go anywhere else.
I really have to be disciplined with my time this morning. And yet there's so much here that I would want to talk about. It's a beautiful picture, almost a picture in which you have to sit with and feel these words and try to understand the dynamics to get the fullness. It seems to me that Peter was out of sorts. Peter said, "I'm going fishing." When Jesus appeared, and they didn't know it was him, we have a comical scene in which Peter has to throw his clothing on and run out to see Jesus. Presumably Peter's not on deck at this time. Peter, even if there's not a below deck area, is somewhere in a way that he's not participating in the fishing. Whatever he's doing, I don't think he's fishing naked. But he's the one that said, "I'm going to go fishing." Now, guys, I don't know about you. We could have a conversation about that later, whether or not it's appropriate or not to fish naked. Some guys are like, "Yeah, I'm all in, as long as I have, a cold one with me or whatever." That's another conversation. But Peter, upon hearing these words from who? The beloved disciple John, right? It's Jesus. Peter goes into a frenzy to get to Jesus, even jumping into the water. That's the first part, with the catch of fish. And then we have the second part where Jesus is recognized and on shore with them, and they're having a breakfast together, a beach barbecue, if you will. And Jesus addresses Peter, talks about his love for him, and then he gives him very pointed instructions, doesn't he? What does he say to Peter 3 times? Something about sheep, right? Sheep are actually fairly intelligent as far as animals are concerned. Considered not quite as smart as pigs. This is just for your trivia so that you can win at Jeopardy next time. Not quite as smart as pigs, about equal with a cow. But did you know that they can actually recognize faces and remember faces for years? They're that smart. So they're not dumb animals, even though we consider them to be dumb animals. You're probably familiar with their behavior in general. They run when they're frightened. They're generally social. You think of them together in flocks, of course, right? And they follow each other. They keep a safe distance, though, from anything that's a perceived threat. And they generally gravitate towards their friends. There is a dominance hierarchy, even with sheep. Some sheep are in charge, some are not. Sheep, though, follow the food. That is certainly an overwhelmingly positive characteristic that I'd like to associate with. They've always pretty much been exploited for that fact, probably by shepherds throughout history, whether it be a bag in which they've created that they've kept something in that the sheep like, they shake it, the sheep follow, and they certainly still do that today. How true that is for me. Shake a little food in front of me, and I'm your good friend. I'll follow along. I'll fall right into line. The shepherds would use this, of course, but if you can get one of those sheep to follow you in any method, the other sheep will follow that one. He'll lead the way. Getting one to lead the way is the difficult part. You may need to find out how to give that one the right and proper push. The great shepherd in this story with Peter found that precise way to push. Peter did not want his love for Jesus to be questioned, let alone 3 times. But that's exactly what Peter got. Peter needed a push. We find Jesus repeating himself over and over again to get this message through. Hence our sermon title today, Peter with Jesus on repeat. Pete with Jesus on repeat, rather. Peter must have been headstrong. We get that idea, don't we? A leader for sure. Just last chapter in John in 20, he was outrun to the tomb. That must have hurt his ego and his pride. It doesn't name the one who did it, but it was the beloved disciple, it said. We know that that's John that outran him. But did you know that in that story it's noted very specifically that John did not go in until Peter got there? Peter went in first. Then John went in and realized, and it says actually that then he believed. That belief was more than just belief that Jesus' body had been moved. John believed in his resurrection. At least I would assert that from that context. But it seems that Peter was in charge regardless. His leadership is apparent. In this piece of scripture here from our lesson today, he announced, "I am going fishing." The other disciple said, "We will go with you." But here's an important part of this story. Now listen, you are listening. You guys are intent this morning. You're on this. Here's your note for today. Those who are leading others need to be sure that they are also following someone. That someone should ultimately be Jesus. But we have other leaders in our life, and we have followers too. We all have someone who is watching us. We are all leading others in some way. Some of us are boss, manager, supervisor, teacher, mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, and even every young person that's downstairs right now has a younger person looking up to them. And if I were preaching to them this morning, I'd give them an illustration of just how true that is, because it's absolutely true. Younger people look up to those kids that are just a little bit above them. You may not see life in that way, that someone's always following you. The reality is, it's happening, you just don't recognize it. We all have followers. Peter had followers. Jesus here wanted to push Peter to be a follower. Why did Peter need to be pushed in the first place? If we find the answer for that, we can apply it to ourselves and have a great lesson from the great shepherd. We can see why the great shepherd had to give him a push, because Peter had followers. He could lead, but could he lead those followers the way that Jesus wanted? He could have gone in many directions. He could lead to a state of health and life and nourishment, but he could also lead them to a place of fear and death. Maybe Peter needed to be reminded this morning about his responsibility. When you are in charge, who reminds you of yours? When you're in charge, there's a good chance that it's you that reminds yourself. And sure, we can do that for ourselves, but we all need someone who can push us. Being pushed hurts. It's not fatal, but it's not quite gentle either. Many consider Jesus to be kind and gentle. I sort of disagree. But he is loving. Loving and caring are the prerequisite for anyone in such a position to speak into other lives. Our great shepherd pushes us. We can process what's happening and respond and move in the right direction just like Peter did. Being pushed hurts. Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, it says, "Do you love me?" It says that Peter felt hurt. Those are the words. It hurts. Do you ever feel hurt by God or challenged just a little too much? Maybe you could call that being pushed. Do you feel like that same challenge keeps coming up over and over again in life, and Jesus is stuck on repeat with you? When you feel that hurt and you feel that cycle in life, be sure to listen to his words. He's trying to tell us something important when that happens. And here's the scary part. What he's trying to tell you probably has less to do with you and more to do with others. Can I say that again? When we're being pushed, a lot of times it has less to do with us and more to do with others. Peter needed some instruction, and Jesus knew exactly how to insert it into his life. And here's a great summary of that exchange. If you're going to take a note, maybe take this down if you can. If you look at it sequentially, you'll see that Peter knew that he loved Jesus. And I would say in parentheses here, and Jesus knew that Peter loved him too. I think Jesus knew it. Think of the shepherd's staff in that case. Jesus knew Peter loved him. But lastly, Jesus wanted Peter to love him by loving them. I'm going to put it a different way, sequentially. Peter knew his own love for Jesus, like many of us do. Jesus knew Peter's love for him too. And then lastly, Jesus wanted him to know his love. Jesus wanted Peter to know Jesus' love. I've got to say it precisely. Jesus wanted him to know his love. That's not always easy for us. We need to find out what Jesus' love is. Jesus said 3 things to Peter. Tend my sheep, feed my lambs, and feed my sheep. 3 distinct and different statements. Every deacon in here should be all amens to this. This is deacon ministry through and through. Peter, a leader, had to be a follower. And Jesus had to connect the dots so that he could feed the sheep. Tend the lambs. And a lamb is a young sheep, vulnerable, prone to disaster, in fact. And we can see that sheep, even though they are mature, they are also prone to following and doing things that they should not do. Jesus says to us this morning, tend my sheep, feed my sheep, tend my lambs. We can gear our hearts and our minds today to apply not just our passion and love for Jesus and praise and worship of Jesus and stay there and bask in the love that he gives us, but we can move that beyond. It seems like I've seen an illustration about that recently. Something about pouring water into our life and it overflows into other people in the world. And Jesus found that way to insert it. For us today, I would challenge all of us to make sure that we have someone in our life that can speak into our life, even if it hurts. Do you have that person? I started out by saying ultimately it should be Jesus. But sometimes we need to hear that voice saying to us, our name. Do you love Jesus? Have you considered this? Are you seeing the full picture? That hurts. I have that relationship, and it does hurt, but it's helpful. Do you have someone who can speak into your life? You hear the difference there. Into, not to, not at, not about. We don't need people who can talk about us, at us, or even just to us. We need someone to speak into us. And we need someone to speak into. We are all leaders and we are followers. Lord, help us to be people who can be spoken into, not resisting, hearing your voice and speaking into others. Help us, Lord, to be like Peter and to take that message and to build your church. Amen.